Good morning, everyone. Whew, what a crowd today. What a day to be preaching, and what a passage to be preaching on. The next one in Luke is actually Jesus blesses the children, which I feel like maybe would have been a better fit for a baptism, but we're going to persevere with this. So my name is Alex. My pronouns are she and her. I've been part of the LUT community since late 2019. My partner Corbin and I, we snuck in just before the Great Plague. And to be honest, before that, I wasn't actually much of a churchgoer. In fact, I once told Glenn Powell at a Sydney Alliance meeting that I was a committed spiritual atheist. I was skeptical of the Bible, and I was pretty wary of Christians on the whole. But I also had an inexplicable attraction to this radical revolutionary called Jesus of Nazareth. My Jesus crush got the better of me, and so 3 years after walking through those doors for the first time, I find myself standing in this pulpit for the first time. And trust me, no one is more surprised by this than me. So let's jump into today's reading, in which Jesus tells a parable to a group of people who thought very highly of themselves. A Pharisee and a tax collector walk into the temple to pray. Now, this may sound like the setup to a very bad Christian joke, but to the non-Christians here, and I've wrangled a few in with me today, I promise you that this is legit an actual parable that Jesus told. So the Pharisee and the tax collector are the archetypes of righteousness and sin. The Pharisee is a religious leader, a keeper of Jewish laws and customs. He follows purity rites, he fasts, and is revered within the community. The tax collector, in contrast, is a deplorable sinner. He's a social outcast. He collaborates with the brutal and oppressive Roman Empire to collect their taxes. He takes more than is required from his own community so that he can line his pockets. He is corruption personified. And in the temple, the Pharisee distances himself from the tax collector, and he thanks God that he is not like other people. And then he lists all of people that he is not like: thieves, rogues, adulterers, and especially our friend the tax collector. But I suspect that the Pharisees' list of deplorables was actually a little longer than Jesus let on. Perhaps it included the guy who wouldn't give him a lower price at the market, or the woman who pushes in front of others at the well, or that other Pharisee that he just doesn't like. The Pharisee's ego is working overtime, and the list of people he judges to be below him is long, very long. He places himself so far above others, he's quite a distance away. I imagine it's rather lonely up there. Rather lonely indeed. And then we have the tax collector. Unlike the Pharisee, the tax collector is well aware of his shortcomings. He feels so low, he can't even look up to heaven. He cries out for God to be merciful to him, a sinner. The tax collector humbles himself in front of God, in front of his community. And it is he, the tax collector, that Jesus says goes home right with God. The humble sinner. Humble and humility come from the Latin words humus and humilis, meaning ground and low. And perhaps that's what it means for us to be humble, to know that we are, like everyone else, connected to the ground. We are not above others, but we are not below others. To be humble means to stay grounded, to plant roots, to connect yourself with the earth and to honor all those we share it with. We are from the ground, and to the ground we shall return. We are no greater and no lesser than any other being who treads this earth, breathes this air, drinks this water. But how easy is it for us to forget that? Last year, I checked myself into a mental health hospital, and I was receiving treatment for major depression. And one morning, I was standing in line to receive my medication, and in front of me was a woman that I had decided that I did not like. I didn't like her because something about the way she flicked her hair, or maybe it was her laugh, or maybe it was the length of her shorts, or what she wore, or her tattoo. I don't know. But I stood in that line and I thanked God that I was nothing like her. Except that it wasn't true. We were both in a mental health hospital. We were both waiting in line to receive our daily meds. We had both decided that our lives had become unmanageable, that we no longer wanted to feel disconnected from ourselves, from our communities, and we had both decided to get help. We both wanted to reconnect. In reality, I was exactly like her. But in judging her, I had separated myself from her, and I had separated myself from God. I had listened to my ego. I had listened to the snake. The snake is a well-known biblical archetype, often used to represent death, destruction, and evil. But the snake is also an allegory to understand what happens when our rampant ego runs wild. In Genesis 3, the snake tells Eve that if they eat the forbidden fruit, they will be like God, knowing good and evil, and that actually, no, they won't die. Lol, God was just kidding. The downfall of Eve and Adam in this story occurs not because they disobeyed God and ate a random piece of fruit and made God mad, but because they allowed themselves to believe the lies that the snake was telling them. Lies about who they were and lies about the nature of God. They listened to and they believed a voice other than God's voice. When they listened to the snake, they were listening to their own ego. Our ego thinks it knows better than God, but it doesn't. So there I was, waiting in the medication line with my would-be friend in front of me, and the snake told me I was better than her, and I believed it. I forgot that she and I were the same. We were both created in the image of God, both made from the stuff of stars, both broken, both in need of God's grace. I was blind to her goodness, her God nature, because instead of listening to God, what God said about her, I listened to the snake. And in so doing, I had missed an opportunity for connection and friendship, the two things that I needed to heal. And so I remained alone, just me and the snake. And I tell you this story because we've all been there. We all spend so much of our lives judging people for all sorts of random, ridiculous reasons. We judge them when they cut us off in traffic. We judge them because of their grammar, because they're different from us, because of the tattoos that they have, how they slurp their food, how they raise their children, who they follow on social media, who they vote for, where they live, where they shop. Our list of deplorables is pretty long. When, like the Pharisee, we judge others and put ourselves above them and before them, we separate ourselves from them, and we separate ourselves from God. We listen to our ego. We listen to that snake who tells us that we're better than. And that snake keeps us very busy with all the people we have to judge. That slippery snake slithers inside our mind and tells us that we're better than. And it might seem fairly harmless, judging people on how they eat, or drive, or talk, or vote. But our readiness to judge doesn't stop there. So great is our propensity to judge that we start telling ourselves that our way of life is better. Our skin colour is better. Our families are better. Our religion is better. Our science is better. Our thinking is better. And we believe it. And when we believe it, we act in ways that create chaos and brokenness all around us. It might start small, but it ends big. It's not hard to see the brokenness we have created in our world, in our country, on this very land, through our judgment of others as less than us, less than worthy, less than the image of God. When my ancestors colonized this country, they judged Aboriginal people to be less than. That judgment created policies, which created actions. Actions like taking First Nations children away from their families and disconnecting them from their land and their spirituality. Actions like denying the humanity of Aboriginal people while they die in custody and never bringing those responsible to justice. Actions like bulldozing 800-year-old Jabwarung birthing trees to make way for a new highway. Actions like campaigning against an Indigenous voice to Parliament by making comparisons to anti-Semitic Nazi-era legislation. These actions, this brokenness, stem from our judgment of others as less than. They were less than because of their skin colour, because of their way of life, their religion, how they dressed, how they spoke, what they ate, where they lived. And as a society, we prayed, God, we thank you that we are not like them. We are more educated, more civilized, more beautiful, more intelligent, more blessed. God, we thank you that we are white. But it wasn't meant to be this way. In our origin stories, where God creates the universe and everything in it, and then she looks around and declares that it is good, this is not what she saw. And it doesn't have to look like this. We can climb down from the place of better than, that lofty perch of loneliness and brokenness. We can ignore that nasty snake and his cunning lies. We can let go of our ego and practice humility, like the tax collector, like Jesus. The prophet Isaiah tells us that Jesus came to be a servant king. He didn't arrive with the fanfare of a carriage. He rode in on a donkey. He wasn't a power-wielding politician, just a simple carpenter. He didn't surround himself with Jerusalem's glitterati. He hung out with sex workers and the poor and divorced women and queers and the disabled and lepers and basically anyone who would have found themselves on the Pharisees' list of deplorables. And then to top it off, he was crucified between two deplorables, showed his resurrected body to some deplorables, and called a group of deplorables to go out and be his body in the world. Jesus humbled himself by serving all those deplorables. And he served them by seeing them as God saw them, as whole, as magnificent, as divine. And he baptized them not as sinners or broken or less than. He baptized them in their magnificence and named them child of God. We can let go of our ego and practice humility. We can know that in our current state, we are in desperate need of God's grace. We can cry out to God just like the tax collector, be merciful to us, sinners. Sinners just like everyone else, just like all those people that we despise and judge. In our thoughts and acts of despising and judging others, we are all the same. We are all connected. And I wonder what we could become if we just stopped listening to our ego. What could life be like if we stopped judging others and instead just gave them a break? What potential could we fulfill if we remembered that every single person on our long list of deplorables is fearfully and wonderfully made? What could life be like if, instead of rolling our eyes or tooting our horn or typing a snarky comment on Twitter, we took a breath, let go of our ego, and tried to practice humility instead? I wonder what life could have been like for the Pharisee if he'd remembered to be humble. Would he have felt more connected? Would he have experienced more love? Would he have lived up to his potential? Would he have felt closer to God? A Pharisee and a tax collector walk into the temple to pray together. They sit next to one another and look up to heaven. And the Pharisee prays, God, I thank you for my friend, the tax collector. And I thank you that I am just like him. Amen.